Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for True show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's always a pleasure to be back with you again. Tonight we're going to cover something that has been worrying, causing anxiety, and distressing many people. Economy, financial concerns. Are you going to be able to go on, to survive, to overcome different barriers of debt? Your credit, is it going to be good? What's going to happen to the country? Do we have a good future? Is the United States going to stay as it is? I was talking to a number of people beforehand, and I saw that this was on their mind. So I thought, okay, let's have a show about this, because it seems to be something that has been distressing people across the boards, concerns. And so let's cover this. And let's first put up on the screen, if you will, Buddha, the image of bricks. And what is bricks? Not bricks like building a house, but bricks. This bricks maybe is to take a house down, or let's see what this bricks is all about. It's actually an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill coined the term BRIC because at that point South Africa wasn't involved. And he stated that by 2050 that the BRICS countries in economies would come to dominate the world economy. Now, obviously, at this point in time and for many, many years, America has been the standard of exchange, and the dollar has been very strong because it's what's utilized as the currency between countries globally. And America got in that position and acquired that position, not by chance, but through many, many years of going through different conditions whereby the world saw that the American economy and the American country, the people, were very steadfast, very productive, stable. You want to invest and put your trust in something that would maintain its value. So what has been happening? And why do we see this nowadays where we're getting this sort of disintegration of this position and concern, obviously, rightfully so, of many Americans of what is the future of our country, because that position obviously gives a tremendous amount of stability and power to the American dollar, and hence the entire country and its ability to produce, to function, to plan. And these are very important factors. At one point in time, years ago, economy was based on gold. So gold was the basis of the backing of the validity of whether something or not really had substance to it. That disappeared long ago. And so the status and the position of our country took that place because of its longevity and its symbol of freedom and its symbol of fortitude, productivity, and really national production, and also helping across the world. So what has happened, and will this happen? So the first thing that I want to go over is that, you know, what actually leads to the future is what we decide today. If one of us decides that they want to retire, but probably you're going to end up retiring, because the person who decides everything in your life is who? Is either you, or if you're joking, you could say, well, your spouse. You know, my wife decides everything, or your wife could say, well, my husband decides everything. And we can joke around good-heartedly, but if we decide, we will retire. You know, at the beginning, when we decide that we see our spouse, and when they're at that point just a friend, you know, and someone that we want to get to meet, we make a decision that we want to get married, that we want to have a family. We may decide that we want to have a certain number of children, and most of the time it occurs. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does. And again, the point being that the decision is the one that we make. So when we look at these things written on social media, on the internet, on maybe very important global economic platforms, it doesn't necessarily make them fact or the future, because without an agreement, it is not a fact. In fact, what I want to actually play is something that is really an example, but is an important example, and it comes from sports, and it comes from something where the person definitely decides, because it's one-on-one. It's not a team sport, so it's a good example of an individual decision and how that individual decision determines an outcome. Now, back when I was in college, there was a boxer who was coming up in the world and was actually unbelievably overwhelming, scary for sure, where even his fellow boxers admitted that they didn't want to confront him in the ring. His name was George Foreman. And George Foreman had decided that he was going to be the winner, the world championship, gain the world championship of the heavyweight division, that he was going to be the heavyweight champion, and that he was going to be the intimidator. He was going to be the one to just rule over his division. So let's play a few of the videos, because there's a point to what I'm going to be giving here on decision and agreement. Let's take a look at the first video, and here we'll see George Foreman and then champion Joe Frazier in their bout. And engineer, let's put that video on, and we'll watch what happened near the end of the fight between George Foreman and Joe Frazier. Obviously, extremely scary. I wouldn't have wanted to be Joe Frazier. And Joe Frazier was a very tough guy. He was no pussycat. So the fact that that happened to him showed not only the strength of George Foreman, but also his resolve and intention. Boxing is a brutal sport, but the point being what occurred. Now let's go on to the next video. Now he faces another world champion who had given Muhammad Ali a lot of problems, Ken Norton. And let's look at this fight between George Foreman and Ken Norton.
Oh, good right hand on the left-hand side of the face of Norton. Norton is a bit stunned as Foreman is teeing off, and it looks like Norton has really been staggered as he went up against the rope.
And again, about 30 seconds later, I didn't want to show it because it's too brutal. I've omitted a lot of the what happened subsequently to those incidents. He lost brutally, and George Foreman won. And the whole world, and this is a point I want to make, the whole world consensus was that George Foreman was unbeatable, that he was too big, that he was too powerful, that he was going to rule, that he would decide what would happen in the heavyweight division, and that he would remain champion for many, many years, and that no one would dare to confront George Foreman. I myself, back that time, thought the same thing, so I went into agreement with it. But now I want to show you something, because there was one man who didn't agree. Everyone thought that when he agreed to fight George Foreman, that he was putting his life into jeopardy and that there would be physical damage. But this particular man didn't agree. He had his own vision. He set his own goals. He envisioned what he wanted to happen. He didn't go along with social media, with television media, with newspaper media. He didn't go along with what everybody published about how he was going to be destroyed, that he had no chance. And so let's now put on this video, and I know that most of you already realize that I'm talking about Muhammad Ali, who decided that he would win that fight, that the world would be stunned, even though they had predicted and they had based all of their predictions on very solid physical grounds. And in case we're losing the point, much like this economic grounds that you see here being put in the media, being propounded, promoted, propagated, that America is going to go down, that America is going to lose, that the world is going to change to a different power because it's evident, because of the magnitude, because of the size, and that we're going to fade into being a third world country, like happened in Cuba, like happened in Venezuela. I happen to be Cuban. My wife happens to be Venezuelan. So I give those examples. And so that America will now follow the same course. But let's take a look at what can happen if we do not agree, if we have our own idea of what will happen, and let's base it on fact of something that was impossible to occur. Buddha, let's put on the fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman.
30 seconds left in round 8. Very even fight. Ali, a sneaky right hand. Another sneaky right hand. This time he works over the shoulder of Foreman. This is a combination. 3, 4, 5, 6. Foreman gets up to the knee. 8.
So there you go, the impossible. But that's actually history now. It totally occurred. No one thought it was going to occur. And yet you saw that all the predictions, all the foretelling of what was going to happen, the damage that was going to happen to Ali. You see that Ali actually looked fresh at the end. He didn't even look like he was sweating. Supposedly he was going to be pummeled, but he didn't look that way. He looked totally pristine and clean and lucid. And he had just knocked out the heavyweight champion of the world that was unbeatable. And I wanted to show you in the previous boxing matches what had occurred. Why did that happen? Was it just physical fortitude? I don't think so. Muhammad Ali was a very spiritual man, very brilliant mentally, very quick-witted. He didn't agree with many things. He made his own future. He continued in spite of many things that occurred in his life. So why do I bring this up? Because it applies to what we're seeing. Because as Americans, we're all like Muhammad Ali. At this point, we're being told that our days are over. Whether you're a Latin American, an African American, a Jewish American, an Italian American, a Chinese American, a Japanese American, we share in common that desire for freedom, for stability, to be able to enjoy our families in the calm of our houses, to have a chance to own our own home. So when we look at an example for the world, we have to realize and appreciate who we are as Americans, that we do have that. No family is without conflict. If you want to be honest and look, every family has conflict. But the key is, do they stay together? Do we learn? And in America, we learn in spite of so many different opposition and opposing and malevolency against this country. Sure, it's not perfect. And this is not a political party. But this is an American, a Cuban American, who was lucky enough to find this country. What happens if this country does not exist for all those immigrants that seek freedom with a Statue of Liberty in the harbor? I think it's important for us to have pride. And like Muhammad Ali say, there's going to be a different ending than what's being predicted. We can go out and produce. We can take pride. We can stop being divided. And we can start wondering, who's causing the division? Are the people touting our collapse behind the division? Let's open our eyes. Let's take a look at why Americans are being divided, fighting with each other, and see who the real enemy is. I don't think it's an African American against a white American. It probably is someone who's trying to sell the destruction of America. In Tuskegee, the Tuskegee Airmen fought for America. And I was down there with Mayor Johnny Ford and the World Conference of Mayors. And they were proud Americans. And in New York, there's many Jewish Americans who are proud and who are proud. And Italian Americans and Oriental Americans. An American is a human being who speaks the truth, who seeks freedom, who produces, and who fights for freedom. America is a symbol, but the freedom is what we all seek. And that should never go away, should never be predicted by a stock market analyst, by economic prediction of no matter how intelligent they are. And that's why I wanted to show you this. Now, the next thing I want to show you is why it's important for us to realize the importance of America. Because it allows people to grow and to change. It's not prejudicial. So now I want to show you something from Mike Tyson, who was also a heavyweight champion and brutal and very tenacious and scary in his own right. And I want to show you, after he went through all of that, what he realized and the importance of what we have in America and what it means to be a human being and not an animal, a human being. Mike Tyson in his own words. Let's play the next video, Buddha.
I don't have the stomach for this kind of no more. I'm more conscious of my children and those guys looking at my parents. I don't have that ferocity. I'm not an animal anymore.
Does that mean we won't see you fight again?
Yeah, that's most likely. I'm not going to fight again. I'm not going to disrespect the sport anymore by losing to this caliber of fighter.
And that from a man, world champion, tremendous ability, not said out of failure, no, but said out of enlightenment, realizing that what does destruction bring? So we have war and we destroy the other country. What benefit did humanity obtain from that destruction? So we have conflict and we ruin an economy. And so people suffer and families don't have food, or their children grow up without familial guidance. Why? Because the parents are working all day long because of the economic duress, and you wonder, why is no one solving it? Well, if someone was benefiting from the collapse of a country, I don't think that they would want you to ever wake up, and I don't think that they would want there to be any funding for families, for parents, for after-school activities, for police to have an activity, for the community and police to get together. No, they would want to divide us. But I ask you this, because you see what champion Mike Tyson said. You saw what champion Muhammad Ali said. And even though I don't have a video of it, George Foreman, 2 times champion, because after losing, he went into spirituality, into godliness, helping people, and then came back into boxing, but not for personal profit, but to help his community, because he had to raise more money for the homes and the community centers that he wanted to have ongoing. And he won the world championship, again showing that it wasn't physical, but it was the mind, because he did that at the oldest age of any heavyweight champion. And really, I got to tell you, I love George Foreman. It's amazing what he did. So as Americans, we need to take a look at this, because we don't have to go into agreement. We don't need to have a reason why it won't happen. We can just make it happen, as all of these great champions did during their years of reign. We can learn from them about being human and caring about one another. And on this show, I wanted to do something, because supposedly on these shows, you have to have a tie. And, you know, you can't have your button untied, because you can't do that and the tie can't be here. No, I wanted to see if somehow something came down from the ceiling or the heavens, but I think I'm still alive. Maybe if I even do another button, you know, it may even look better. I think it looks fine. So I think as Americans, we need to start something new calling Disagree. Support your country. And all the parties unite. I hope this video goes viral, because I love America. I would have nowhere to go. I want to put one last video on that has to do about obligations, because as Americans, we have an obligation to the world to set an example. Let's show that video about obligations, please.
15. Fulfill your obligations. In going through life, one inevitably incurs obligations. Factually, one is born with certain obligations, and they tend to accumulate thereafter. It is no novel or new idea that one owes his parents a debt for bringing one into the world, for raising one. It is a credit to parents that they don't push it any harder than they do, but it is an obligation nevertheless. Even the child feels it. And as life continues to run its course, one accumulates other obligations. To other persons, to friends, to society, and even the world. It is an extreme disservice to a person not to permit him to satisfy or pay off his obligations. No small part of the revolt of childhood is caused by others refusing to accept the only coins a baby or child or youth has with which to discharge the weight of obligation. The baby's smiles, the child's fumbling efforts to help, the youth's possible advice, or just the effort to be a good son or a good daughter commonly pass unrecognized, unaccepted. They can be ill-aimed, often ill-planned. They fade quickly. Such efforts, when they fail to discharge the enormity of the debt, can be replaced with any number of mechanisms or rationalizations. One doesn't really owe anything. I was owed it all in the first place. I didn't ask to be born. My parents or guardians are no good. And life isn't worth living anyway, to name a few. And yet, the obligations continue to pile up. The weight of obligation can be a crushing burden if one can see no way to discharge it. It can bring about all manner of individual or social disorders. When it cannot be discharged, those who are owed, often unwittingly, find themselves targets for the most unlooked-for reactions. One can help a person who finds himself in the dilemma of unpaid obligations and debt by simply going over with him or her all the obligations they have incurred and have not fulfilled, moral, social, and financial, and work out some way to discharge all of those the person feels are still owed. One should accept the efforts of a child or an adult to pay off non-financial obligations they feel they may owe. One should help bring about some mutually agreeable solution to the discharge of financial ones. Discourage a person from incurring more obligations than it is possible for him or her to actually discharge or repay. The way to happiness is very hard to travel when one is burdened with the weight of obligations which one is owed or which he has not discharged.
So there you go. And why did I put that on obligations? It's because as Americans, we have obligations to our country and to the world. Because when you want to be a symbol of freedom, there's opposition to freedom, unfortunately. And so with that ability and with that competence, we carry the duty of being the example to the world. I don't think America is going into darkness. I don't think we're going to be going into third world. And I want to actually quote you some things that as a young boy from Cuba, I heard and loved. President Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." Let's do that. And when he went to Germany, because he was not an isolationist president, but he traveled the world and they loved him. In Germany, he said, "Ich bin a Berliner," that he was a Berliner and the Germans loved him. And then years later, President Ronald Reagan said something very appropriate for tonight's program. He says, "My philosophy of life is that if we make up our mind what we're going to make of our lives and then work hard toward that goal, we never lose. Somehow we win out." And something to end this show on regarding families and giving our parents across the country time to be with their children so that the communities can quiet down and be prosperous because we have happy families. This is what Ronald Reagan said: "All great change in America begins at the dinner table, where we get together." So let's all, as Americans, have a chance to get together at our dinner tables with our families, with our children, with our husbands, our wives, grandfathers, grandmothers. And let's set an example for the world that in 2023, America decided to show the world that intention is what creates things. And as Mr. Hubbard said many years ago, when we can fully trust each other, there will be peace on earth. Let's bring that peace. Let's create that trust. Let's make our families safe. Let's work to make a better world. I hope you enjoyed the show. Let's make it more than a show. Let's make it a reality. See you in 2024. And I'll have another show showing how we change the future. Good night.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet